I'm Jewish. My family came from Poland. We will go to war against white nationalism and racism in every aspect of our lives.
Do you think that it's a racist act to cast a vote for President Trump in 2020?
Well, at best, it means looking the other way on racism, but
I talked about how dangerous President Trump's open racism is, the Mexicans as rapists and criminals, the Muslims who should be banned from this country. But it wasn't until someone inspired by Donald Trump drove more than 600 miles to my hometown and killed 22 people in my community. There is a concerted, organized attack against immigrants, against people of color, against those who do not look like or pray like or love like the majority in this country.
Welcome back, everyone. I want to give a quick shout out to this channel sponsor, ribtea.com. Make sure you head on over to ribtea.com/DroneTech and use the promo code DroneTech to get 20% off most items. Over the weekend in Portland, Oregon, Democrat Party terrorist organization Antifa showed up for the express purpose of starting violence, and surprise, surprise, innocent people were targeted and attacked. Considering all the rhetoric coming from the Democrat presidential candidates and their PR firm, formerly known as the Fourth Estate, it's actually surprising to me that there hasn't been more violence, but I fear that it's a powder keg that could go at any time. One thing that I've noticed while watching these confrontations escalate is that it reminds me of the protests in Ukraine that led up to the war with Russia. It started out with fists and helmets and shields and quickly escalated to guns and then war. I'm not saying it's the exact same situation, but there are many similarities that are worrisome. You might think it's a bit extreme to call Antifa a Democrat Party terrorist organization, but I think that it's an accurate description of what we're dealing with right now. Antifa and other left-wing extremist groups have been perpetuating violence against the political opposition of the Democrat Party, and this goes all the way back till before the election. At the same time, you have Democrats and their cohorts in the media like CNN and MSNBC actively giving cover and promoting these groups. A great example of this happened in San Jose when Trump supporters showed up for a rally. Supporters were corralled by police and then beaten by Democrats waving Mexican flags. It's a real thing that happened, and San Jose is currently being sued for it, but the media hasn't shown any interest. Republicans have been targeted for violence on more than one occasion, with one of the more severe attacks happening when a Bernie-supporting, CNN-loving terrorist targeted a group of Republicans and almost assassinated half of the GOP Senate. How about the recent attacks on ICE facilities? The same ICE facilities that Democrats and the media have been calling concentration camps. Funny though, they never called them concentration camps at all during the Obama administration. Or how about the calls from violence by allegedly mainstream Democrats like Maxine Waters, who bragged that she threatens Trump supporters all the time, and even suggested that people form mobs and confront Republicans in public. Or how about Cory Booker, who told his supporters to get in the faces of Republican congressmen? Or Hillary Clinton, who famously said that you can't be civil with people you disagree with politically. Or Bernie Sanders, who just recently stated that if he becomes president, he will wage war on, quote, white nationalists. A dangerous statement when you're constantly demonizing your political opposition as racist or white nationalists. But don't blame Bernie if one of his supporters decides to take action. He can't be held responsible for all those people.
You need to tell your supporters.
Millions of people voted for me. If I have to take responsibility for everybody who voted for me, it will be a very difficult life.
Since our media is basically just an extension of the Democrat Party, or the opposition party as Steve Bannon always called them, they have the ability and the power to hold their opposition to standards that they'll never hold themselves to. Since they demonize their opposition as inhuman monsters, they're able to rationalize using these Orwellian tactics. That's why they can defend and promote Antifa, a violent communist organization, yet never be held responsible when they or other left-wing extremists resort to violence. I mean, for fuck's sake, their standard for inciting violence includes criticizing Democrats who happen to be people of color. Just look at how they treat Clarence Thomas or Ben Carson, or Kanye West for that matter, to see that these standards are only applied one way. So the media is able to run cover for Antifa by simply omitting inconvenient facts and sugarcoating the reality of the group. For example, on ABC and NBC News, they reported Antifa as being simply counter-protesters, or they reported one side as being right-wing extremists and the other side as being left-wing anti-fascists.
Violent street confrontations in Portland, Oregon,
Michigan. 13 people arrested, 6 injured when more than 1,000 right-wing demonstrators and counter-protesters descended upon the downtown area. Police say they were pelted with water bottles while making an arrest there.
Saturday, right-wing extremists went head-to-head with left-wing anti-fascists.
You'll notice that on all these alleged news networks, they never focus on all the hammer and sickles, a symbol that represents death and oppression. You'll notice that they never bring up inconvenient events like the beating of journalist Andy Ngo by Antifa members. It's all done in service of advancing the narrative that Antifa are simply anti-fascists, despite the fact that they look, sound, and act like fascists.
It is not free speech, it is hate speech, and we as the people of this city are not going to take.
Would love to hear your side.
There's no two sides. There's Nazi and not Nazi.
You see, it's so freaking simple to these lunatics. It's also black and white to them. They put on their masks and they get into their mobs, and their media, Democrat Party incited psychosis just takes over. These people are already nuts, but then you put them into a mob filled with other nut jobs, and suddenly they think they have the right to beat up anybody who somebody else calls a Nazi. The media has been using tactics like this for a long time. I first noticed them during the Obama administration being used against the Tea Party. The media constantly demonized the Tea Party as racist and violent, despite the fact they weren't racist or violent. In fact, they went out of their way to expel bad apples and even cleaned up all the trash after their rallies.
Okay, well, Kira, we'll move on over here. I think you get the general tenor of this. It's anti-government, anti-CNN, since this is highly promoted by the right-wing conservative network Fox. And since I can't really hear much more, and I think this is not really family viewing, toss it back to you, Kira.
Clearly, there's violence out there being perpetrated by left-wingers, so why aren't they being held to the same standard that Republicans are being held to? The simple answer is they control the flow of information, and they've rationalized anything in service of winning in 2020.
We have a president now where you have a manifesto where someone's calling out the president.
Listen, I'm not going to fight with you about this because I want all the voices in. Talk again.
Poppy, it's an unfair jump to make that to say advocating violence. Poppy, when the gentleman shot up the Republican baseball team, right?
Yep.
Who was a fan of social media on the left and television on the left and politicians on the left. Was there a hue and cry against those television personalities or those politicians that fueled the flames of that gentleman?
So, Congressman Gutierrez,
I'm just asking a question.
Yeah. God, she won't even answer the question in an utterly lopsided panel of 6 versus 1. The fact is, the San Jose Shooters Manifesto sounds like what presidents have said going back decades, including Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. Wanting to stop illegal immigration and secure our border wasn't racist up until the point Trump got elected. There are literally millions of Americans of all backgrounds and skin colors who want our border secured and illegal immigration stopped. And guess what? None of them are perpetuating violence. Whatever happened to the argument that you can't blame a whole group of people for the actions of a tiny minority? In this case, it's one guy. There's been 2 attacks on ICE facilities, and one of them had a manifesto that reads like a CNN transcript. All of this tells me we're living in an increasingly Orwellian nightmare that reminds me more and more of the Arnold Schwarzenegger classic, The Running Man, where the media oppresses the masses by controlling and manipulating the flow of information. That's all I got for you today. Please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Lastly, if you want to support this channel, please consider subscribing to me on Patreon or Subscribestar. Not only are you helping this channel to survive and grow in the face of unrelenting discrimination by YouTube, but you're also getting access to exclusive videos once a week, as well as the ability to suggest video ideas and access to my community Discord channel. Thanks a lot. I'll see you all tomorrow.